And hi, everybody. Welcome to Cloudy with a Chance of Therapy. My name's Justin.
I'm Kristin.
And today we're just doing our normal podcast about life, mental health, and everything else. Um, so before we get started, anything else? How you doing? How's your week?
It's been a week. Um, I'm looking at a new personal diagnosis. My therapist thinks that I might have PTSD, so been kind of dealing with that a little bit, as well as it's been a week. Had an interview on Monday, had two on Tuesday, another one on Friday. So we'll see how those go.
Now you mentioned a new diagnosis.
Mhm.
So I know that's been kind of messing with you a little bit. So go through, talk to me about what that's like with getting a new diagnosis. How does it make you feel? What's it do to you?
So for me personally, I've been sitting with just the diagnosis of GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, as well as depression for probably 8 years, give or take. But I personally have a trauma history, and at some point I will talk about that on the podcast. This podcast is not the cast to do that. So basically, when you think from a clinician's perspective, when you think a client has a diagnosis, that's either that they haven't already been diagnosed with or that you want to add to their diagnoses, there are screener things that we do. So we do one that's called it's a PQ, and don't ask me what it stands for, but there are depression screeners, there's anxiety screeners. What I took was a PTSD screener. And I scored in the moderate to severe end of the numbers. So things that you have to factor into with diagnoses: are there any extenuating circumstances? And by that I mean, um, is there anything going on? So like PTSD, one of the diagnostics that we look at is ability to focus and stay on task. So I struggle with that because I have an ADHD. No, I have an ADD diagnosis, although it's all ADHD now. My attention deficit does not come in high def. Um, in other words, I don't have the hyperactivity aspect of it. So that's something that I've been kind of trying to s- struggle with it. I mean, probably. It's one of the diagnoses that I consider like a big diagnosis. It it can be like borderline personality disorder. I mean, actually, often people with PTSD and CPTSD will often be diagnosed with personality disorders that they may not have because the some of the symptomology is very similar. Mood swings is really, really common. And that's probably the biggest thing that I struggle with. It's mood swings are not accurate and entirely accurate.
Real quick. So, and you guys, if you listen to this podcast over time, you're going to recognize this. Kristin tends to deflect into clinical mode when asked personal questions, which is what we just got there. What does it feel like?
Um, Broken. It's the best way to describe it. Not it. It's not that I don't agree with the diagnosis. It's just diagnosis coming up can affect self-worth. It can affect um
You're getting clinical again. What does it feel like? Talk to us about just what does it feel like to suddenly be like, oh, I have PTSD?
clarifying. Like it makes sense. But it's like I said, it's can be kind of scary because it is what I consider like a big diagnosis.
Yeah. So, no, you were talking about we were talking about this earlier. You were talking about how now you feel like suddenly there's something brand new wrong with you, right?
Yeah. Even though it's and that is a sociological phenomenon. Looking glass self, that's what it's called. You examine past experiences with new information, and it changes how you view past experiences. But for me, it really feels like, well, the information hasn't changed or doesn't feel less accurate. It puts things in perspective. It makes me feel, we refer to it as trauma bingo. I don't, I, air quotes that you can't see, don't feel like I've experienced anything in the same realm that other people have to feel like I qualify for the diagnosis, if that makes sense. When the reality of the situation is that, like I've said, one, there is no trauma bingo, and two, we don't define trauma by does it leave scars. And I
Or how big the scar is. It always leaves scars.
yes, yeah. It's like my I have there are people in my life who have had much worse, again, air quotes that you guys can't see, experiences in their life that I feel make would make more sense for them to have a PTSD diagnosis, whereas I don't feel.
But it's not like there's a limited number of PTSD diagnoses out there.
Yeah, it's not like it's a box of cookies. Um, there's no Cracker Jack prize.
But it sucks, right?
Yeah, it does. It's there's a level of vulnerability to it that I am not real keen about as a human being. Well, I can be very open and vulnerable in a session with a client because that is what I need to be. Um, Vulnerability with certain people and about certain things is um, feels like you've been stripped of protections or guard.
The walls are down.
Yeah,
You're, we are left naked before the teeth of our trauma and pain.
yeah, and PTSD requires trauma work, and that is a thing that is uncomfortable and it is painful and it is soul bearing and
So today we're going to continue talking about PTSD. One, it's relevant to us, and two, we don't. Krista felt like we didn't quite get there.
we're gonna talk about anxiety disorders.
Oh, we're talking about. So next week is
Next week is gonna.
next week. All right. So this week we're talking about anxiety disorders.
Yeah.
But all right. So real quick, you said trauma work
Mhm.
as a general thing. What do you mean by trauma work? What does that entail?
It requires you to be able and willing actually to address a trauma experience face on. Like it's no there's no being around the bush, there's no those kinds of things. It is very much upfront and personal, that with this idea that we're going to talk about the nitty gritty experiences, and not necessarily the nitty gritty experiences that you went through, but like how the trauma affects. So there's a book that I highly, highly, highly recommend. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. It is not an easy read by any stretch of the imagination, but it really does help put into context what our body does with trauma. So there is a mental aspect to trauma as along with the physical aspect, and then the mental aspect causes us to carry things in our body. And that's this is a very reductive, boiled down, boilerplate overview of work that is what it's deep, hard, painful work. But essentially the concept with the body keeps the score is literally just that emotional experiences have an effect and an impact on how our body processes. Another thing that I'm going to highly recommend, anybody listening to this podcast who has experienced any kind of trauma, there's a study called the ACEs study, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences. And one of the things that study came about is how trauma and experience, like how specific things we experience during childhood can have a effect on our body and our health. So the realization came about. And there's a fantastic TED talk that I will try and remember to link on our Facebook page that I highly recommend as well about the ACEs study and how if you've experienced things like growing up in a household where abuse happened or you witnessed abuse, which are some of the questions on the ACE study, that you have a higher percentage chance of struggling with things like asthma, heart disease, diabetes, all of those kinds of things. And so, again, that kind of goes into that concept of the body keeping the score. It's not just physical tension, it's a, a manifestation of that emotional turmoil and how it has an effect on the physical body.
You can take the ACEs score. American SPCC has a version, but if you just Google
Yep.
ACEs test, ACES test, you'll find a version of it, and it's one of those.
It's like 10 or 12 questions, and it's a one for one score. So if you answer yes, it's a point. If you answer no, it's not a point. And NPR did a fantastic, probably like 5 years ago, study on, I believe, um,
What's considered a high ACEs score?
anything over like 4.
Oh, well, I just took mine. I got a 7.
It's actually probably is that accurate at a 7?
Maybe like I didn't have anybody go to jail or some of those kind of stuff. Maybe I did actually. Hold on.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, no.
Oh, and all of these are under the all of these questions are under the age of 18.
Probably should have actually been a 9. No,
Yeah, I was gonna say your score. We because he and I have done this test before. I was gonna say I thought yours was a 9. I thought that sounded low.
yeah, no. I forgot about some stuff. Um,
I think mine's a 6, 4 or
but
6.
okay. So
Preface real quick. Next week's episode is going to be specifically on focusing on PTSD and CPTSD.
so we're gonna get into some trauma there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so today. So now we've got trauma work, which is going to be responsible. It's something you have to do with almost any anxiety diagnosis, right?
Um, it depends on the diagnosis. So a lot of times phobias don't necessarily come from trauma. Social anxiety, they
But
can.
yeah.
They can. So like claustrophobia might come from trauma. Um, but um an OCD can come from trauma, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. Um, but it's like separation anxiety might trigger from
Is that one of the ones we're talking about today?
yeah.
Well, let's talk about that then. Let's get into it.
So separation anxiety, you were gonna say something.
I was going to say, so tell me about what is separation anxiety?
So separation anxiety is an anxiety that commonly affects kids because of
Especially young kids, right?
especially young kids. It doesn't always only focus on kids, but that's more predominant. It's a design, it's a where the child or person gets anxious when separated from their comfort person. So that could be a parent, sibling, significant other, just depends on the age of the person.
Like a stuffed animal, even, or something like that.
Yep. It's not often comfort items if a kid is exhibiting, there we go, issues with being separated from a comfort item.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm going to say is more anxiety. That's probably more displacement than actual separation anxiety. So it can mimic symptoms of like OCD, like where they'll have these obsessive thoughts. If they leave, something bad is going to happen. If they leave, something bad is going to happen to me, or something like that. It's those kinds of thoughts. Now um, I would say you could have separation anxiety from a pet, um, because a lot of times people downplay the relationship that people have with their companion animals, but it's commonly considered something that is a childhood, or adolescent diagnosis.
So, when you have separation, how can, again, layperson, how can a layperson help? If like you gotta, if like say you've got someone who's, we gotta go for a while, other person's not gonna be there, and there's nothing really to do about that. How do you help?
So, I think with the advancement of technology, there's a lot of things that we can do to help mitigate that. FaceTime, or video chats through whatever program you want to use. You can't spit without hitting one. But things like that, like, same as like, uh, pillowcase, letting that person have the pillowcase from their comfort person, so that they can this smell, like weave, because
T-shirt.
t-shirt, or
You had a T-shirt with my cologne on it for a while.
I did.
Yeah.
Separation anxiety is something that I've struggled with off and on, although we're not 100% sure that like that's an actual diagnosis that I have. We think it's kind of more just anxiety, that there's a lot more going on with that, but it's essentially, it's almost like OCD thought processes. Like if this person leaves, something is going to happen to them, it's going to happen to me. I can vaguely remember a couple of different times as a kid having those, if mom and dad leave, something bad's going to happen, because for a period of time, anytime my dad left on storm duty, something would happen. So it had almost, um, had this reinforcement of that concept of, they dad left, something bad happened.
Because your dad was an insurance adjuster, and he would go off on like when major hurricanes or something like that would hit, he had to go around the country
Yeah,
and deal with that.
or study, or flooding, or like, those kinds of things. So it's like when hurricanes, Andrew hit Florida, he spent time in Florida.
Well, was there anything your mom did at the time that helped? Do you remember?
Um, it wasn't, so dad wasn't my touching person, mom was.
Hmm.
But as long as I had one of my parents, I was typically okay.
Okay.
It was typically when they both left.
Well, so I don't know if we mentioned before, but you're an only child.
I am.
And so you grew up in the same, basically the same household your whole life, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
So when you came to Huntington, you came to go to Marshall University.
Mm-hmm. And my
That was your
parents,
first time out of the house, right? So that was, you had
yeah.
some separation anxiety issues there. Is there anything that helped?
Um, well, for the first, and my parents joked, that they left me and I was gonna beat them home. I was gonna be sitting on the front porch when they got home. Um, Mostly I went home every weekend. I
Made what contact you could.
Yeah. And then as I started creating a support network in Huntington, I went home less often because I didn't need, it's not that I didn't need my parents. I had a great relationship with my parents, and I miss them dearly.
But but you didn't necessarily need them to remain centered
Yeah.
because you had developed your own. So would you say having a, so if you got like a kid, like offering, of course, succor and comfort and that kind of thing to somebody who's having it. So it's like it's that same. It comes down to that same. They're not making a choice, like they're not throwing a tantrum.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think separation anxiety is essentially just throwing a tantrum, and it really isn't. It's, I think, the closest that a kid can get to, OCD symptoms. Like I said, it's literally, they're spiral thoughts. You get kind of caught in this, something's gonna happen. Um,
So same kind of things, breathe, calm down, that sort of thing.
yeah, so you can't think past that fear. It's that the thought process are all consuming. And that's kind of why I'm likening it to OCD, because people with OCD will say that those thoughts and compulsions are consuming.
They're spiraling, intrusive.
They are extremely intrusive, to the point where it's like those thoughts are driving the bus. You can't think past the, if I if this thing is happening, that like there's going to be a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So okay, um, the so we got separation anxiety. What are the other one? The one we're talking about today?
Well, the ones that we didn't really like talk about in depth last week were social anxiety, separation anxiety, GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, and OCD.
Well, let's go with social anxiety.
Okay.
So I know that's a common one for some people, and you
Again,
and I both suffer from it occasionally.
yeah. So, it's everyday interactions. It's not just, oh, I'm going to be on stage in front of a bunch of people. It's, I have to go to Walmart to get groceries, or I have to go to the bank, or I have a doctor's appointment, or it's not, sorry, I had to rearrange. It is a,
It's called a fear of interaction.
uh, a lot of people feel like it's a fear of being judged. It's more that you're in a fishbowl and everybody's looking at you. And I kind of liken it back to that scene from Carrie that we've all probably seen, or in some way like they're all going to laugh at you. That is a lot of what social anxiety is. It's a fear of judgment, it's a fear of being watched or observed or feeling like you're being studied. I've had clients describe it as feeling like you're under a microscope, feeling like you're in an aquarium, feeling like you're a zoo exhibit. Um, and even if it can be things as simple as just getting food in the cafeteria, or and it's what we kind of consider simple things that can really drive that anxiety up.
So I know for me, because I'm a cynic, reminding myself that nobody cares, like, is how I tend to deal with that. Like, and I don't, but I would bet that doesn't work for most people.
Yeah. It doesn't work for a lot of people because um we are conditioned, because we're a social species, that we care what people think. We want to belong, we want to be a part. And the social anxiety just kind of takes those fears of not being liked, because we all want to be included, we all want to be a part. None of us wants to be ostracized, none of us want to be othered. And separation anxiety just kind of takes those feelings that we all have and ramps it up to the point of I can't, but like I can't function. So it's less about, it's not the act of going to Walmart that is stressful. It's the, I have to talk to the person at the checkout line. Well, if I don't do, like, if I don't check out in the checkout line, I can check out in the
Check.
the self check, but I'm still being observed. Those are the rubs that
So,
people struggle with.
because like after COVID, a lot of people had issues with going, like, developed social anxiety or worsened social anxiety they had before. Because during COVID, we all just kind of isolated for a year and a half,
Yeah.
and then suddenly we had to go back out into the world.
And the world is scary.
And the world is scary.
And we and our like, I say our generation, my husband and I are millennials. Um, but it's our generation really struggled with that concept of, we've, well, one, that was a collective trauma. But two, we kind of had the outside world is dangerous, and COVID and how everybody acted during COVID kind of drove that home. And I think if you haven't lived through some kind of societal experience like that, like if you didn't live through a nasty storm, and I'm talking like hurricane, ice storm, like storm of the century kind of things.
Just have to put you in the house for 2 weeks.
Even more than that, like things that displace.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what COVID did. COVID, well, it might not have physically displaced anybody, it socially displaced a lot of us. Like we couldn't go out and do things. We couldn't go to the movies, we couldn't go to the mall, we couldn't do all those things that we did to help keep that social buffer.
We had to all to turn inward.
Yeah, we all had to turn into hobbits, for lack of a better word, and not all of us can jive with that. Some of us can be hermits and be okay, and not all of us can.
Yeah,
And
I was fine.
I'm a very social, and I'm what I consider myself an extrovert with introvert tendencies. My husband is an introvert with extrovert tendencies, which is why we work so well together. But I think the difference is I thrived on outside, and I was also working at the time in a residential program. So there was a lot that I wasn't able to do in the same ways. Don't mind him. His allergies are acting up, so he's just coughing up his lungs. Um, anyway, and I think that that had a big impact, and I think that that's why like we have people who probably wouldn't have ever developed social anxiety issues do have them now because of COVID.
Hmm. So, as always, how do we help?
A lot of it is just understanding that when somebody with social anxiety cancels on you, it has absolutely nothing to do with you. It has to do with bandwidth. It has to do with what the experience is. Like, um,
Well, one of the things I know has helped is that people we know with social anxiety, I have offered to be like, hey, you need to go grocery shopping. I'll go with you, and we'll go late,
yeah, that
or either
buffer.
very late or very early, or smack dab in the middle of the day when there's no one there.
Yeah, having a buffer person, having a safe person that you can go with and be like, hey, I need to go back to the car. I've got to know out of this. Can you finish what we're doing? And that's one of the things that you and I employ, because Walmart is still a struggle for me, for that same reason. It's just I got out of the habit of being, I was very insulated during COVID because I was frontline at that point. I had to be very careful with exposure. At that point, too, my mom was in a nursing facility, and so exposure, I had to be very mindful of that. And so that was something I had to be very aware of, and it just encouraged that homebody isolationism that feeds that anxiety. There are certain kind of behaviors that feed anxiety, and isolation and not doing things really does do that.
Okay. So yeah, so with social anxiety, it really is just keep going out, like as much as you can when you can, right?
Yeah, and it's also remembering that we all have batteries essentially. We have bandwidth and what we can and can't do, and not pushing yourself past the point of overexhaustion.
So spoon theory.
Yeah,
You
spoon theory.
Google spoon theory if you haven't before.
Yeah, and that's something like when we do when we talk about self-care, spoon theory is going to be something I talk about. But it's this idea, it's conservation of energy. And so it's understanding that certain activities are more draining than others. And so keeping that in mind when you plan activities or you do activities, and then just, you know, understand, like, I have friends that are people that I can go and be like, hey, I want to be in your presence because you don't necessarily drain me. However, the thought of going outside really does. So can we just like sit on the couch and watch a movie or something like that? Or play a video game or something like that. And finding ways to get social interaction that isn't necessarily going to the mall or doing those big stressful things.
Okay. All right. Well, we are right about the end of this episode. Anything else you want to hit before we go?
Yeah, I really like to kind of very briefly talk about GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, which is just kind of you have anxiety, but we don't know what caused it. But it's not something that is like you're not having the disassociation or anything like that. So it's just kind of I don't want to say generic, but it really is kind of it's we know you don't have OCD, we know you don't have panic disorder, we know you don't have any of these others, but you have anxiety symptoms, so this is the diagnosis that we give you. So it's kind of that umbrella, and it's like if you wanted to say anxiety was an umbrella, GAD would be generalized anxiety disorder would be the framework, while everything else is underneath of it, if that makes sense.
So if you have a GAD diagnosis, you're not like lesser anxiety. It's not like somehow a lesser form of anxiety.
No,
It's just a non-specific form of anxiety.
Right. It's kind of like we know you have anxiety. Clearly you have anxiety symptoms, but you're not necessarily having panic attacks. You don't have OCD, you don't have separation or social anxiety. You're not afraid of spiders or tight spaces. So we know you don't have a phobia, and that's arachnophobia and claustrophobia if you were curious. But we know that there's something going on. So it's kind of like it's the general term or it's the general like, diagnosis. We know it exists. It's kind of like dysthymia, which is a depression diagnosis. It's persistent persistent depression. It's like we know you have depression, and it's just kind of there. It's just persistent.
Okay.
And then the other thing, OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. At some point, I would like to do a sole episode on this, but just kind of.
Well, that's you have a specific intrusive thoughts, usually about your environment.
Yeah, so they're often time consuming and can cause significant distress and interfere with daily life. So, in any diagnosis, anything that causes a decrease or severe disruption in daily functioning is when we get concerned. So it's marked by uncontrollable reoccurring thoughts. So those obsessive behaviors and repetitive or excessive behaviors like a compulsion. So it's like flipping a light switch, locking and unlocking a door. You've noticed I do it kind of occasionally with the car. I'll hit the lock button until it honks a couple of times so I know it's locked. And that is just it's I have to hear it honk. But
more than once. You have to hear it honk more than once.
Yes, but
that doesn't rise to the level of compulsion.
No. It's just that's an example. I do have a friend that has an official OCD diagnosis, so I would really like to have her come on the podcast if she's willing and talk about it kind of more in depth so you can kind of have an idea of what it's like for someone who's in the trenches of the diagnoses. But it's that sometimes I think something bad is going to happen. Like that's why I was using that as a comparison for separation anxiety. It's that I think something bad is going to happen. I'm worried something bad is going to happen.
And so the way you assuage that is by locking the door 12 times.
Yes. There is again, I'm going to try and remember to link all of this stuff on the Facebook page, which is the same as It's Clouded with Transit Therapy. But there is a poem called OCD on Button Poetry that is phenomenal. The guy talks about how he had found someone who helped basically calm those anxieties. So,
okay. Anything else you want to hit before we go?
I think next week, like I said, we're going to talk about PTSD and CPTSD, kind of focused on that. And then after that, we're going to do kind of move into, I think we're going to do an episode on self-care. So,
do depression first or self-care?
What did I tell you?
I don't know.
Hold on.
We have a very loose idea of a schedule. So,
yeah, close it out with coping skills before moving to depression.
Okay. So before, since we're going to call that there. So, as always, if you have any questions you want us to answer, email us at cloudy with a chance therapy at gmail.com. No of.
Yep.
And we will try to get those on. We'll answer any questions we get. I don't think we've really gotten much yet. But things are still new. Hopefully we'll get some someday.
Yep. Well, in their defense, we did post the podcast real late.
Last week was real late. That was mostly on me because I didn't get around to doing it properly. But anyway, and so otherwise, anything? Otherwise, then it's thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us. We love you all. I've been Justin.
This is Kristin.
And we'll talk to you next week. Bye.